All right, Joe Ryan from Clemson University. Background's been in behavior my entire career there. I was a BD teacher. I taught K to 12. So I taught general ed, self-contained. I taught special day school, residential. Then went on to higher ed, opened up Clemson Life, post-secondary education program for young adults with intellectual disabilities. And so I've embraced behavior throughout my entire career. So this is one of the most fun things, aspects of it there. We talked about, if those who I've seen some familiar faces here. So we've talked about data collection yesterday, then we talked a little bit about behavior management plans, and then we're going to talk about other recommendations, finishing up with managing aggressive behaviors there. So again, starting out with 4 types of violence there. This is like one of my favorite pictures of all time, little psychotic kitty cat. But again, it's situational violence, and that happens, again, we talked about yesterday was ecological environment there. Sometimes it's a forced problems of behaviors there, okay? Are those elevators nice and large in there, going up to the hotels? How many here are staying at the hotels? So what happens when everybody gets in there with the bags and everything else, and it's like suddenly there's 7 people, but it only fits like 4 in there? In a good mood when that happens? No. And automatically there's certain situations there. How about when you were lining up for registration yesterday there? Was that a fun experience? And you guys are very well-behaved teachers there. So certain times, it's basically the situation itself, the ecological environment can force behaviors from kids. It's especially true, especially when we deal with autism there. Okay? So in other words, those sensory issues change the classes, right? So those personal boundary spaces, okay? Do kids with autism love rubbing shoulders with other people? No. Where do you see a lot of issues there? On the buses and transition periods where people are knocking backpacks back and forth there. We also have relationship violence, okay? In other words, is because how many here always have, the kid with the ED I can always pick out really quickly. Because of all the incident reports is there's Joey and Tommy, Joey and Susie, Joey and Bobby. What's the common variable here? There's always that relationship of Joey being involved somewhere in regards to that. And then we have predatory violence. I'm a bullying prevention for Ulvius there. You'll see a lot in regards to that. And then the last one, although Hollywood loves it, it's very rare, psychopathological violence. And that's your little kitty cat up there at the top there. All right. What we're going to talk about is how, real quick, we're going to start out with how schools overuse certain interventions there. And the scary part of this is. So physical restraint and seclusion we're going to talk about here. Cute picture of a little girl holding her little, class pet rabbit there. Well, she's deceased now. Do you know what her crime was? She blew bubbles in her milk container. And she refused to stop when the staff came in and tried to intervene and said, stop. We'll get escalated a little bit there, okay? She refused to respond to the staff to stop blowing bubbles, so what do they do her? They put her in a seclusion room. And in the rules for the seclusion room, you need to be in the chair quiet for 5 minutes. Well, she refused to comply. So they left her in there for several hours. And then when she fell asleep on the floor, the staff came in, woke her up. What happens when you wake them up? If I was to wake you up, are you in a good mood, or are you a grumpy person who wake up there? How many people are grumpy people when somebody wakes you up from the thing? Yeah. So she had a meltdown, a tantrum there, calling for her daddy, everything else. Because she was having a tantrum, kicking and screaming, what do you think the staff did? They restrained her, and they suffocated her, okay? So let's fix you. So in other words, the dangers of physical restraint are huge, and we'll talk about this in disproportional use with our population with special needs, okay? Seclusion is another area, the danger itself. In Georgia, we had a kid hang himself there recently there, okay? Many schools have been using these because, again, remember, educating students in the least restrictive environment, we're taking a lot of students with emotional behavior disorders and starting educating them in gen ed settings there now. So, well, teachers are pretty smart people. They go up to the special day schools and residential, and they go, well, how do you deal with Joey when he deals that? Well, when I talked residential and special day school, we used seclusion rooms, okay? But we were highly trained. We trained every single week on the use of the seclusion and restraint procedures. Public schools don't do that. But public schools start creating seclusion rooms. But was your school designed like a special day school or residential with a seclusion room? No. So what do you think teachers start doing? Using your creativity and making seclusion rooms out there. They start making different, basically out of Lowe's or whatever, little boxes and everything. They're not ventilated, they're not lit. Or even better sometimes, they use what is standing available that you can lock a kid in. Closets. Okay, and what do we keep in closets? Cleaning materials, other dangerous equipments and stuff. So there's a whole host of issues that opens up. Office of Civil Rights came in and looked at for the use of restraint and seclusion. 70,000 students in one academic year were subject to physical restraint across the United States. Okay? 37,000 were subject to seclusion there. And again, 4,000 kids on IEPs were mechanically restrained. Okay? Mechanically restrained is I'm using some device to limit your movement that you can't get out of the chair. All right? If you're looking for kids with disabilities, 3/4 of that who were restrained were children with special needs. Okay? So it's very disproportionately used. But even for my gen ed teachers, that means 1/4 of the population, they're using these same procedures on kids who are not special needs. Okay, so in other words, understanding the problem with this one. And again, for looks of the seclusion, over half of the children were with special needs, which means basically almost half the kids that are being put into closets and everything else are not children with special needs. So understand this is a problematic across the United States right now. The issue is, how many here have gone through restraint training programs? Man, CPI, which we're going to talk about. Okay? When can we use restraint procedures and seclusion? When are you allowed to use them? Last resort, which means what? They're a threat to themselves or others. Well, I've worked for the last 10 years in reducing the use of these procedures. And at one school, they had 4 seclusion rooms in a special day school for children with ED. They restrained every single day, multiple times. I go into a review of the school. They had kids sitting outside the seclusion room waiting for their turn to get into the seclusion room. Jessica looks pretty quiet to me. She's sitting quietly here. Why would you possibly want to take a child who's sitting there quietly, waiting her turn, to get locked into a room in regards to that? When I went through the incident reports to see what these procedures are actually used for, now it was a core response over here from my trained folks. Very good job. This is what they actually used it for. The number one was leaving assigned area or non-compliance. This is exclusion, this is restraint. In other words, is they pissed the teacher off. That's why they went hands-on with the student. Okay? What was the reason that you all gave in that core response? 3% of the incidents reported would actually use for what they were supposed to be trained for. Okay? This was well-trained staff. Special day school, all ED teachers, all paraprofessionals trained in crisis intervention on a regular basis. Now you apply these same procedures in a gen ed setting where they go, how often is your recertification? Every year to 2 years, depending upon the program there. And do you train on a regular basis, on a weekly basis? What is it like? How many here, everybody here should have first aid CPR training, right? When you got out of first aid CPR training, if I saw somebody choke, have a car accident or whatever, I mean, I would know exactly what to do, right? ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation. I mean, it would be as fresh as day. What happens if I come upon that accident after a year or 2 years later? Ooh, A. Well, what is A again? In other words, it's not that fresh. And neither of these procedures, especially with restraint procedures and everything else, that's why a lot of kids get hurt. If you haven't practiced it, just because you went to a procedure for self-defense or anything else, could you actually execute it a year later? The likelihood is no. And what most staff do is exactly what they do with that little girl is they use their body weight on the back or chest and the child dies of asphyxia. Or they get broken bones on the way down. And they're not the only ones. Staff get injured too. Those, how many here do restraints in schools or whatever else? Anybody? How many here have known staff members to get injured? Lower back injuries. Because when you do the training, where do you do the training? Wide open area, isn't it? It's beautiful. Sometimes it's mats and everything else in the gym. Does your classroom look like this? No, your classroom looks more like exactly what you're sitting in. And so if you're going to do a takedown, what's the possibility? First name, sir? Tony. What's the possibility that we're going to be able to take Stacy down without hitting a chair, a desk, or anything else, without either Stacy or our own bodies? Pretty limited, okay? And those are what the understanding is, the change and the challenges with using these. Understanding when we're talking about crisis today, there's really 3 potential outcomes that are going to happen. One is our relationship with the student is going to be damaged, in which case, that's awful. Because we're going to talk about later, but to change behavior, the child needs to trust you as an adult that you're out for their best behavior. The other one is basically can remain unchanged, or we can improve the staff relationship itself, in which case it's going to be more therapeutic for change in the future there. So those are the 3 potential outcomes. What we're going to talk about today is hopefully it's more therapeutic of the outcomes, of how you react with the student there. Understanding the conflict cycle, how many here have heard? Where's my ED teachers? I hate you. Is that the most common thing that you've heard as an ED teacher or whatever else is? You're mean to me, you hate me, or whatever else. Or they come back from the other teacher, she hates me. She hates me. That's why I got in trouble, it wasn't or anything. It's an irrational belief, though, isn't it? Okay? but it's very much reinforced all the time. Because if I get sent out your math class, Stacy, and you're teaching math, whether you like it or not, you're the math teacher now, and I get in trouble, what are you going to do? The consequence, right? Which is going to reinforce my belief that Miss Stacy hates me in regards to that illogical thought process is going to continue on with the child. So understand that we need to break that cycle there. The conflict, and this is basically what happens. And the understand is typically many times staff, what we're going to talk about how to respond to communication and everything else is, people mirror your behavior. But basically is how staff sometimes incite behavior from the students because basically they're mirroring back. Okay? I expect the students, especially those with emotional disturbance or whatever, have skill deficits, to react inappropriately. I expect us as professionals not to mirror that same behavior back because all you're going to do is throw fuel on the fire. Okay. What staff need to know, what the training is, understand the causes of high-risk behaviors. Many times with kids with disabilities, it's skill deficit. It's either going to be a skill deficit or a performance deficit we're looking at to change. Most of the kids, if you're talking to early childhood, it's almost always skill deficit. But as you get older, don't assume that even if he's high school, 18, 17, 18 years old, that it's still not a skill deficit. But you're like, but every other child knows it. Yes, but this is a child with learning disability, with emotional behavior disorders. More likely still assume at first that it's a skill deficit until he or she demonstrates it's not. Talk about prevention strategies, environmental. We'll talk about things such as the line yesterday to register there. How can you change the ecological environment so you don't set up for failures for people to push and fight and everything else there, okay? Minimization strategies, we'll talk about training staff, okay, to recognize, we'll talk about the cycle of aggression. And then management strategies, again, I highly recommend if you work with ED that you do go through those MANT, CPI, we'll talk about several, there's over 20 programs. So I've done a couple article reviews you can review because all programs are not alike. Some believe that it's therapeutic to restrain a child. It is not. There's no research evidence base at all, but it's based on the 70s approach, though, that they thought hugging a person was therapeutic. Many of my kids with ED were physically and sexually abused. If you were sexually abused as a child, would you really want 3 male staff members holding you down? Do you think that would be therapeutic or bonding in any source of imagination? Okay. And then again, post-management considerations, how do you debrief? We're going to talk about that because that's the goal is the way that he or she acted that got into this crisis wasn't effective. So how do we come up with a game plan next time? Because that same crisis is going to come up again. You know it is. It's going to come up for some of our kids. It's going to come up in the afternoon. For some, it may be a week later. But that same situation, whether it's on school or on the bus or at home, is going to arise again. What are his or her actions next time that's going to lead so that crisis doesn't develop again? How do we eliminate that? How do we teach that skill? Intervening in the crisis, we could do several of 1 of 4 choices. A, we can modify the stress level for the child itself. We can alleviate the students' distress feelings. We can talk with my counselors. No counselors here? None of them? Okay, they're really good at that, okay? And again, the open-ended questions, talking, sometimes just venting. And if the issue is with Jessica, with Mr. Ryan, I'm not an optimal person for her to vent with, am I? Because who does she have the issue with? Think about that. If you had an issue with your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, or whatever else, are they the person that you're going to vent with? No, they're not really good people to talk to. That's when you have friends and everything else or whatever, coworkers, therapists, whoever else is. In other words, don't force the child to talk to the person who he or she's having the issues with. That's not going to be very conducive. We can change the student's behavior, that was yesterday's sessions there, or we can change the behaviors of others if he or she's getting instigated maybe. We would talk about changing those behaviors there, but those are ways. Principles for effective intervention. Number 1, I can't emphasize this enough in my teacher candidates, is remain calm. Don't show that they've got your button. How many here have had students get your button at least once in your career there? Were they kind enough that once they got that button, they were like, ooh, I shouldn't touch that button again? No. What it did was it highlighted in neon red that this is the button they should touch each and every time they have the opportunity to touch that. Did they not? Okay? So that's a tough one for many teachers because they take it personally. Okay? You can't take it personally. All right? I don't care what you say to me. I don't know how many times. You got the biggest nose I've ever seen, Mr. Ryan. That's great. But we still have to work on the math right now. Because once you deflect, they're not going to pick on that anymore. Whether it's your weight, whether it's your height, whatever it may be is. Okay? The way you talk, anything else is, you need to make sure that they don't have that button. If they do, they're going to be pressing that button every single, what's that commercial? The easy button or whatever else, for Office Max or something. They're going to be pressing that as many times as they possibly can. Understand is you want to isolate the individual there, especially with middle schoolers and teenagers and everything. How many have broken up a fight when you have basically the entire cheer section on the side? Go, 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 go. In other words, I want to get this person individualized. All right. Watch your body language. Did I say anything to her? What am I giving off right now? Dominance, aggression, or whatever else. If I'm trying to calm somebody down, is that a good way to do it? No, it's an awful way to do that. It's also very dangerous for me because if she does strike out, every vulnerable part of my body I have right now is vulnerable to be hit. Okay? Use silence. This is a big one again. We like to talk. We're teachers. It just comes with the trade. Okay? Let the student talk. The more she talks, the calmer they will get. The more that you interrupt, and again, I'm a guy, so it comes natural for me. I've got to just tell myself, Joe, shut up, okay? Just let her talk. They will calm down there, okay? Use reflective questions there. Don't ask closed-end questions for a yes or no response because that's exactly what you're going to get. Are you mad? Yes. Okay. Like, why are we mad? In other words, just start thinking about your questions before you do. And then again, watch for paraverbals there. No, that's fine. Paraverbal is basically saying something complete opposite of what your body is telling somebody. Does that make sense? So be careful when you do that with your spouses. My wife does it a lot too. Whatever else, it's like, no, that's okay. You go ahead and go. It's like, oh man, I'm a dead man. All right. 10 tips for crisis prevention there. Be empathetic to the child there. Clarify your messages. Keep it clear. Remember, when they get upset, do we have good peripheral vision when we get upset? No, we go to tunnel vision, do we not? Basically, and again, remember, the kids have limited skill deficits as it is, so we want to provide as many choices, options to the students, everything that's possible there. But remember, the more they get upset, the narrower they're looking there, okay? And they're going to go back to their repertoire. Do they have a lot of repertoire of behaviors to choose from? No, pretty much comes back with physical aggression or whatever, verbal aggression, every single whatever they come back with. So provide choices for them. Permit an opportunity for verbal venting. I talked about that. Avoid overreacting. You shouldn't respond there, okay? And again, you need to learn to pick your fights, okay? If I know that Stacy's getting escalated or whatever else, I'm going to let Stacy mumble under her breath and everything else there because I know she's agitated. I'm not going to go back. Did you say something? Mm-hmm. In other words, you need to let it rest there until she's more calm or whatever else, and then we can talk offline about respect and everything else. But I'm not going to fan the fire here just because she may have grumbled something or dropped a 4-letter word on me. Okay. All these alternatives require us to be proactive. Okay. Again, provide crisis training to the staff there. Teach anger to the student. This is critical when we teach social skills. Is you got to teach the kid how to de-escalate and calm himself down before he gets mad. Starting to have a lesson plan is not a really good. We're in the middle of driving here. You guys get snow and ice all the time. Teaching a kid how to handle a slide and ice or whatever is not a really good time to teach that, right? You want to do it in a parking lot before the necessary. Develop those skills before it's actually needed and they can be applied. Okay? And this one's a huge one. If your school does use seclusion rooms or whatever else, Corey will talk at the end of this presentation session, use other alternatives like cool-down rooms or whatever else, where in other words, the child can come or go, but he can basically get out of there. Or interclass timeouts, where instead of sitting in your class where I have the issue, Miss Kelsey's mean to me and everything else, I get to go to Miss Aaron's class or whatever else and calm down there. Does that make sense? I'm still in an educational environment. I'm calming down. I'm being supervised by an adult, okay? And I'm not basically have my life in danger in certain things. Again, crisis prevention training, I highly recommend these things. I've worked with a lot of schools and to reduce that. I've worked with Minnesota schools in reducing basically 40% of the seclusion basically in a semester of training with the staff on a regular basis there. Jones, after death of a student, they worked with a residential center and reduced it up to 3/4 in the residential center after a student was killed. That was court mandated. Okay? These are some programs that are out there. CPI, MANT, DevRo, JKM, NAPI, PROACT, okay? I have articles out there that review those if you're interested in those types of programs. This is kind of weird to me. What kind of car do you drive, Kelsey?
A Chevy Malibu.
Do you drive a Chevy Malibu because everybody at your school drives a Chevy Malibu? No. You drive a Chevy Malibu because you like the Chevy whatever for a reason and the features that it offers. How many here chose the programs that you went through because of what it offered you? Or was it because they told you you're going to training and it's MANT or CPI or anything else? Would you buy anything as a consumer without looking and comparing at different programs? Because they're not all alike. They're very different. Some don't teach any restraint procedures. There's only crisis de-escalation. Others teach over 20 different types of restraint procedures. Now, if you work in a crisis unit, a residential center, you may need to know how to do wall restraints, floor restraints, 4-man, 6-man, 8-man restraints, and everything else. If you're in a gen ed setting and you just have a resource, you don't need that. You need the crisis intervention component of that. So why would I buy a Chevy Malibu with 4-wheel drive or whatever it is, whatever else, and I'm in the city and I'm never going to be off-road in my lifetime? Does that make sense? So you need to be an educated consumer. Just because somebody in your school got trained in it doesn't mean that it's the best thing ever. Just because your friend has a Chevy Malibu doesn't mean everybody should run out and buy a Chevy Malibu. Okay? So understand, we'll talk more, we'll come back to that component. Next thing we're going to talk about is communicating with aggressive students. How can you, before they get to the psychoaggression, how can we calm them down a little bit there? And the number one is never, ever, ever argue with the kids. And I don't know how many schools I go in and I see this. Stop talking. Stop talking. What does every child say? I'm not talking, or whatever else. And so you see a grown man arguing with an 8-year-old back and forth, or a woman. I go, that's ridiculous. That is absolutely ludicrous. Don't argue with them. Okay? So, and again, how can they get you mad? How about by some of these? See if you had every one of these, a student do this. Ignore, pretending not to hear you. Doing exactly, this is for the young child, early childhood. Doing the exact opposite, come here, and they go away, or whatever else. Denying any wrongdoing. Not that any of us have ever done that either in our lives there. Okay, my son is 5. He's already learned how to do that one there. Blame it on the cat or whatever. It was the dog who did it. Repeating a question over and over again. Mimicking you. Insulting or verbally assaulting. Trying to change the topic there. Kids are really good at trying to change the topic there. They're trying to redirect the teacher if they can. It's a good skill for teachers to learn. All right. Teachers can take the bait. Number one is by showing any signs of agitation. This one is a definite no-no. And I've been in professional meetings with IEPs or whatever with teachers there. Guys, I don't care what a mother says to you. I could care less. She's a parent. We're professionals. We never act and respond that way or whatever else. They can drop as many 4-letter words as they want, calling anything and everything in the world or whatever else is. We are always professional back. Okay? Because if, for whatever reason, they do get under your skin and you say anything, it's really simple. The school lawyer is going to ask one question. Did you say this to that parent? They could care less what that parent said, did, or anything else. The only care response is, did you say this or did you not? And it better be, I did not say that. Okay, so be professional at all times. And it's difficult because many parents you're going to be dealing with are very aggressive and everything else because of the behaviors of the child that they're dealing with. All right? Don't ever plead. This is I deal with teacher candidates all the time. Yeah, it's a command. It's not a request. If they need to do something, don't plead with the student or whatever else. They are not in the position of power. You as the teacher are in the position of power. And then again, as this one is, don't ever set unrealistic consequences. How many here of you should still be in your bedroom right now grounded by your parents for what you did in high school? Come on, there's a few of you. Car incident, what was there, whatever else, curfew, 3 a.m., 5 or whatever else is. Don't set that. And teachers do this all the time. Okay? Tony, you lost recess for the whole week. Is that the stupidest thing I could ever do as a teacher in my life? What did I just do? Punished yourself. I punished myself by handcuffing Tony to me for the entire week now. And so what does every teacher do once they realize that was the stupidest move they've ever made? They forget about it. So what does Tony now learn? He's going to test the boundaries. How many here have parents on basically the same thing is you have to be in by 12 o'clock. And then sometimes you come in 12:30, you weren't punished. Well, what is the kid going to do? 12:45, 1 o'clock. They're going to test boundaries. Be as consistent as you possibly can. How many had parents that if they said 10 o'clock, it was 10 o'clock, no ifs, ands, or buts? Raise your hands. Did you ever violate that rule? Oh, the boy, he's still supposed to be in there. But basically, the consistency, if you follow up on the consequences, Tony's going to know I am or whatever else, and then give a reasonable one or whatever else is. You need to be with me after school or whatever your consequence for lunchtime. All right. Maintain calmness, things you should do. All right. This one I want to highlight 2 things. One is this one's really important. We'll visit this again, is personal space. Tell me, Stacy, I'm going to pick on Stacy all day, when I violate your personal space. Oh, look at the eyes shoot up and everything else. Look at that. Look at it. She's like going to Tony for help, man. Tony, please help me. Typically 1.5 arm lengths is what our personal comfort space is, unless we're intimate, and then you can get closer to that, okay? So if you know the child well or whatever and you're working with it, look at it, Tony's got both of them. Understanding is it's 1.5 arm length. What happens when we get mad? Think about your mother when you were a kid. Anybody ever piss their mom off? Just a few of us. I was the youngest of 6 kids. Did you even go into the house when she was upset? Did you go in the kitchen and go, Mom, can I get a hug? No. I was the parakeet. The older brothers and sisters would throw me in the house to see if she would eat me first or whatever else there. It's like, as you get mad, your personal space increases tremendously. Okay? So the last thing that you want to do is when somebody's getting upset is start violating that personal space, because what you're doing is you're throwing fuel on the fire. Okay? So respect that and understand that when the person's getting upset, don't be going right in front of them there, and don't be showing those aggressive stances there. Be more on the side. You can get down and kneel eye to eye. In other words, you don't want to go for positions of dominance, because what you're saying is basically you're drawing the line in the sand going, do you want to fight? Okay? And offer choices. Remember I talked about how tunnel vision, when they start getting stressed out, well, they're not thinking very well. What I want to do is help their thinking. And what I always like to do is I want to lead with the choice I'd like them to do, and I want to finish with that choice against. In other words, just in case you didn't hear it the first time, Aaron, I'm going to go, well, why don't you go talk with a paraprofessional and go walk and cool down? You can continue doing this, but you're probably getting in trouble, and we've got to call mom and everything else. So why don't you go walk with Tony, okay, and just calm down. So I'm going to offer it the first time, and I'm going to offer it again. I'm going to give his offer choices for it. Okay. Now, don't give the Chinese menu where she gets confused and there's 50 different choices, but keep it simple there. Active listening, I already talked about this one there, is making sure, giving them time to basically vent to you. Okay, don't ask closed-ended questions there. Make sure it's talking about the behavior, not the student. Okay, the student's never a bad person. It's the behavior that's inappropriate that we have to deal with there. Okay, I don't want our kids thinking that they're a bad person there. All right, this is one thing for active listening. For those who are not gifted at it, men, raise our hands. Okay, we need to practice this. Okay, every one of us, I do it every day. Concentrate, give them your full attention. At least pretend. Okay, we're gonna make eye contact, give them the full attention. I versus you messages. All right, this is gonna help everybody's marriage. Don't ever say which word, I or you. Don't ever say you. If you say you throw the person into offensive stance automatically there. You got me so mad. Well, what do you automatically? You're thinking of defensive articles on the thing. Well, it wasn't my fault or whatever. It was your fault and everything else. If you go, I was upset by your actions or whatever else, it's much less aggressive on the other person's part. So when think about that, and again, counselors do this beautifully because they're trained in it. Teachers, we got to work on it. Okay? So in other words, when you get upset, whatever the person you're talking with them, express it what happened to you. So it was, I was upset because of your action. I was embarrassed or whatever due to the thing. Don't ever say you got me mad, because the person's automatically going to shut down and start defending against it. All right, proximity there. If a person starts acting out, just putting the presence in it, in other words, teaching your class and everything else, I know Aaron's getting upset or whatever else, just being in the area will give you the attention. I don't have to take off the lesson plan or whatever else. I can keep teaching and everything else, but just the proximity can help calm her down a little bit. Unfortunately, research shows very clearly that when students start acting up, what do you think teachers do? They hide and they get tethered behind what? Their desk. They start going to a safe spot. So rather than engaging, and think of it, same thing as police and everything else. What happens in police communities when the police pull back from a community? What happens to crime rate? It goes up. What happens when they just have a presence, more of a presence? Crime goes down. Same thing as in the classroom is the more I navigate my classroom, the less problem behaviors I have. Where most problem behaviors occur in most classrooms? Back corners, people that I can't get access to or whatever else is, because the teacher's never there to give proximity. I don't have to correct you. I just need to be in your proximity area, and the students are going to self-correct on their own. Okay. Proximity, we talked about this one, a personal space. Understand that when a person gets upset, their personal space increases. Just think of your mom when you got her mad, okay? Give them room, give birth, okay? Praising in public, if you are going to correct the students, correct them in private. Okay, and one of the first things I have my teacher candidates do when they go out and observe, they have to do about 10 different observations of students. First one's not on students, it's on the teachers. Okay, and the goal is 5 positives for every negative comment that they make to the students. And you want to see the environment in the classroom. Is it a positive reinforcing classroom, or is it very negative? Unfortunately, most of the teacher candidates come back, it's not 5-to-1 ratio. It's basically the opposite. It's the majority of the comments the teacher makes are negative, and very few positive comments are made to the students. So if you have to correct, all I want to do is go in close and whisper, make it very thing, so I'm not basically ostracizing the child in front of all the peers. Okay? How do you discuss unacceptable behavior? Because you have to. Okay? Indicate clearly that this behavior is unacceptable. I don't want to go over it if you do something or whatever else. I want to say exactly what that behavior was and what a more desirable behavior should be. Okay? What was expected of you there. Okay? Recommendations in the classrooms. Anybody new teachers or all experienced? Any new teachers in there? What I recommend for all my teacher candidates is to think of all the possible scenarios that you can face. What would happen if a kid says F you to you? How are you going to respond? What happens if a kid throws a desk across the classroom? How are you going to respond? The last thing you ever want to do is get caught flat-footed and try to make a decision on the spot. If you do, and kids will, how many here have ever been flat-footed because a kid did a behavior you just never thought you'd see in school? Okay? Don't make the consequence right there. You're in the position of power. All you have to do is correct the behavior and then go, we're going to talk at the end of school today or whatever else. Is that even worse? What would happen where you, think of you, you're on the receiving end of whatever else of the consequence, but you don't know what's coming. It could be they're calling mom. It could be I'm going to the principal's office. You don't have to make a rash decision. Rash decisions are typically bad decisions. Okay? Now I go back and I go to my colleague mentor down the hall and I go, hey, this is what happened in my classroom. What do you think? And I get feedback. I go to the administrator or whatever else of discipline again, because I don't want to do something that gets overridden. Because then the administrator comes back, Joe, you can't do that. Well, now I go back, do you think the kid's not going to be laughing at you the next time there? Because you said I was going to do this, I'm not. So don't put yourself in those positions. Put yourself in the position of power. Just so, I'm not sure right now. I got to talk to the administrator or whatever else, but we'll decide what the consequence is later. Okay? But try to think as many actions that you can beforehand. Things you should never do. A, don't take everything personally. Okay? I don't care what they say about your height, your weight, your looks, anything else. I see experienced teachers there like, yeah, they'll get to say anything, and it's basically be a duck. Let it roll off your back. Okay? And that for many people, the first couple of times is challenging. Is it correct? Am I correct? First name again was? Deborah. Yes, Deborah. Deborah, have you seen that with classrooms or whatever? And have you seen teachers take it personally? Okay? And you've got to talk with them and go, it's okay. This is not your best friend calling you something or whatever else. This is a student. Or, again, never, ever, ever touch the student. Because remember, what is the personal boundaries? What happens to that personal space? It increases. So I've seen more teachers get hit because they went in to what? Touch the student. Okay? You have no right to touch the student. Okay? And you're doing the exact opposite of what you should to calm them down there. Okay? Don't taunt the students. I've seen inexperienced and senior teachers do this there. Again, basically draw lines in the sand. And then don't ever threaten the student with consequences that you're not even in control of. Okay? All right. Communication methods that don't work. Demanding compliance right now. Be quiet. Consequences without explanations. Some of us had parents that did this. Okay? And then if you really want to torque your entire class off, this is the best thing ever, do a group punishment. That's the best way, because in inexperienced teachers, what happens is they start losing control of the classroom. And so some people who are troublemakers, Tony starts acting out or whatever else, and then he gets some followers into the thing, and then what happens is I have other people who were on the border fence or whatever start talking to their friends, they lose control, but I still had poor Jessica who's working or whatever else and a couple other students. So rather, what you should do is reinforce the people that you know would get back on task. The other people will buy into it. I'm getting reinforced for the behavior, and now I can isolate who's really causing the problem in my class. If I do group punishment, I guarantee you're getting a phone call from the parents all through. The administrator and everybody else is, what happened? Why did my child, she was doing work and she lost recess and everything else? So don't set yourself up for failure there. What you should do is always, number one, is situational awareness, think safety. Okay? I don't know how Jessica's going to get mad. Some students just put their heads down. They put their hoodies up and they go down, and that's their peak cycle. Jessica could be the type of person who throws the computer at me. I don't know yet or whatever else, but I want to think safety is, where's the door? Where is Jessica? Where am I? What other students are around that? The worst phone calls you'll ever make as an educator is to a parent who got hurt and she wasn't in the situation at all. She didn't instigate, she wasn't a problem maker, but she threw the computer, she threw a punch or whatever else, and she got in the way. So think of the safety of the students. It may be a point, if I know that Jessica gets physically aggressive, then I have the paraprofessional start exiting other people around her. Start moving, giving space. Okay? So always think safety first. Can I get other help? Can I ask for assistance? Can I get a runner? Can you do me a favor? Can you get the administrator back here? Whatever. Get some other help in the classroom there to help calm the situation down there. Other things you should do, okay? Offer choices, we did that, okay? This one of the most important, I should put it on top, you can't even see it, is provide time. We artificially inflate bad scenarios there. And if the simple fact is, I had an administrator, he did the same thing at a residential after I left, they lost a kid from restraint. Never restrained again afterwards there. By doing one thing, providing time. Not providing artificial time that the child has to leave the room now. It's okay. We can move the classroom. Okay, guys, we're going to go play kickball outside or whatever while Tony hangs out here in the classroom or whatever else with the paraprofessional. In the hallways, how many times have you seen hallways? School resource officer, everybody else. No, you got to move now, Tony. You got to move now. Really? Is he going to get fired if he doesn't move in the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes? I'd rather leave one paraprofessional with Tony all day long for 7 hours than to have 4 people monitoring a restraint procedure going on in my school. Does that make sense? Much safer, much more cost effective, much more time effective. Don't put these artificial timelines on students because it doesn't matter. Okay? If necessary, we can wait till 2:30 to your parent come pick you up for all I care or whatever else there. I'd rather do that, wait 7 hours with a paraprofessional. I've had other schools where I go, just give him a walkie-talkie. Let him walk on the track. I give him a paraprofessional with the walkie-talkie. If he runs, we'll call a school resource officer or whatever else. Okay? Don't force a bad situation there. All right. Another strategy is called coping, okay, to rapport. And again, it stands for control-oriented patterns. We'll go through that. Okay? So again, as control, the student needs back in control before the situation can be discussed. Administrators typically bust this one. We'll talk about this in psychoaggression is. Because it's a time rush. I've got meetings, I've got parents coming in, so we start talking with Kelsey before Kelsey is calmed down. Not going to work. The only thing you do risk doing is sending Kelsey up for a second peak cycle. And a lot of administrators will see that with fights in their office or whatever else because the child wasn't ready for processing yet there. Okay? Orient, let them tell their story. And the reason that I like this goes back to Nicholas Long's life-based crisis intervention is it gives you an opportunity to build a timeline. All you know is there was a fight and you were involved. I got to play detective now. I got to go, well, who are the other students? Who are the other players? Who are the instigators? What was the trigger? And when did this start? Was it now at recess? Or does this go back a week prior or whatever else to the thing? So it gives you just letting them vent and talk. And remember, are they going to come out in this logical, sequential storyline? No. This is like, you're going to hear facts and bits and they're going to go jump time from last week to today or whatever else. That's okay. You can ask clarifying questions, but let them vent, let them and get their timeline there. Because remember, they're trying to figure out what to tell you without getting themselves incriminated too much. So they're trying to think at the same time they're speaking. Identifying patterns. This is crucial. If you have a repeat performer, a frequent flyer, okay, if it's the same person that's always getting in trouble, always showing up to the principal's office there, what are the patterns of behavior that are causing this? What are the underlying functions of the behavior? Is it escape? If the kid keeps acting out in math class, it may be he's escaping. And it is difficult because what happens is Miss Jessica loses the aversive student in her math class. She loves it, so she does it really quickly, sends them to the administrator. You hated the math class. Well, you get to escape. When I have both parties being reinforced for the maladaptive behavior, guess what? You'll see it happen 80, 90, 100 times through an academic school year, and you go, that doesn't make sense at all. You know, Einstein's definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result. What made you think that sending her to the administrator's office for the 101st time was suddenly going to change her maladaptive behavior? Okay? It's not. Negotiate. Okay? Talking with a student, negotiating what are realistic goals. Again, we shape behavior. If somebody fights, cusses a lot or whatever else, you're not going to go from a high level of performance to a 0 level of performance overnight. We shape change behavior over time there. So what's a realistic goal for not demonstrating physical aggression, verbal aggression, or whatever else for the student? Okay? Demanding that she be just like every other student is not realistic. Okay? That's like someone going to a person who smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and tomorrow is 0. Probably not going to be realistic for most people. Okay? Consider contracts. Written contracts are the best there. Okay? And then again, you strive to give control back to the student because our goal is for them to self-monitor their own behavior, not for us to follow them around. All right? And the goal is basically a win-win negotiation. When you buy a car, should both parties be happy? Should the salesman be happy and the buyer be happy? Yeah. Otherwise, it's not a good deal, is it? Okay, so you want, so in other words, it's a give and take on the thing. So when you sit down, just don't make demands of the student without meeting her needs or whatever. So take that into consideration there. If the student's uncooperative, this is the key one. Let them talk to somebody else. If Stephanie is mad with me, what's the likelihood that Stephanie is going to open up and start expressing herself to Mr. Ryan? 0.001 likely odds of likelihood of the thing, okay? So what I want to do is fine. That's when I want to get a counselor, another special ed teacher, somebody else that he or she can talk to. They'll open up, vent, and calm down. Okay? Think about that. If your spouse or wife was really upset at you, the time is not a good time to go up there and face and let the person calm down. Okay? All right. Steps to gaining compliance there. Again, allow time, provide choices, okay? And then understand is what the behavior is to talk about that. Not going to beat that one to death. And now, this is the crux of the presentation here today. Okay. Like this one. If you got better cartoons, send them to me. I love cartoons. It keeps people awake. Well, aren't you just a fun little lollipop triple dipped in Psycho? All right. I think that was Lion King? Was it? All right. It's the acting out cycle. Every person goes through this cycle of aggression. Okay? And most of the training programs, CPI, MAT, and everything else will teach this. This will be a portion of the training before they go into the strengths and everything. We're normally at a baseline level of performance. Okay? Everything's wonderful. What I want teachers to do when the child's operating baseline is reinforce those behaviors you want to see in your classroom. Unfortunately, many teachers, what they do is they ignore the pro-social behaviors they does, and I'm only going to jump on Tony for demonstrating maladaptive behaviors. Okay? That doesn't work really well. So what happens is if I'm not going to reinforce the pro-social behaviors, you're going to see those behaviors start to extinguish. Okay? And is any attention better than no attention? Depending upon the child, it may be. And so Tony may start acting out more just because he's getting more attention from the thing. What's going to happen is eventually we're going to hit what's called a trigger. Now, some triggers are fast triggers. Alicia pulled my backpack, knocked me down. That's a fast trigger. The kid's going to get up, swing, or whatever, respond. Some triggers are slow triggers. How many here didn't get their coffee this morning? How are we feeling when we didn't get our coffee? Are we happy? What happens? Many kids work at night, right, after school. They get home late. So they get home like midnight or whatever else. And what time does high school start? 7:30. 7:30, which means the kid's up at like 6 o'clock. So he's tired, right? So you didn't get home to bed by 1 o'clock or whatever. So now you didn't get your coffee, your caffeine. You didn't get your sleep. Are you a pleasant person to deal with? And you just found out you failed one of the tests or whatever. Those are the slow triggers that happen, okay? So in other words, some people can get set off by slow triggers or fast triggers. Slow triggers are more difficult to ascertain on what the cause is there. But whatever's going to happen is the person's going to get in a state of agitation there. If you didn't get your coffee and you still didn't get your coffee or whatever else, Starbucks closed and everything else is, she'd get a point of agitation there. This is the most important sign. I want to stop the cycle of aggression as quickly as I possibly can. This is why not paraprofessionals, but substitutes have so many problems in schools. Because paraprofessionals don't know what your baseline performance is. All they get to see is when you're going through the cycle, they may just think it's normal. You as the regular teacher, no, you seem a little agitated today. What's going on? Just giving a child attention can calm most of the problems. What I recommend for the teachers is when the kids come in your room, meet them at the door. Because as they're coming in, and I go, hey, how's it going? Fine. Hey, how's it going? Fine. Hey, how's it going? Hey, Tony. And Tony puts his head down or grumbles. I know he's already going up somewhere on this cycle of aggression. And so all I have to do is give attention to him. Hey, Tony, let me get everybody settled down. We'll go talk in a second or whatever else. Letting him vent at that point will resolve the majority of all problems. Because many times as you have like red flag carrying, maybe you were picked on the bus. Maybe somebody was instigating in the bus. Maybe it was a slow trigger. You missed breakfast or whatever else is. We can resolve that. I can get you some snack or whatever else on the thing and resolve most of the problems before it escalates there. If you miss this, the child's going to start going through an acceleration stage. They're no longer on task. They're looking for somebody, what I call, to dance with. Who are they going to start dancing with first? Person closest to you. Who would that be? Tony? Who's closest to you? He's going to start instigating his friends here, his peers, the classmates. And this is what you're going to hear for the teacher is, Tony's doing this, Tony's picking on me or whatever. That should be like the first sign, clue to your ear, that something's going on there. Okay? So in other words, you're hearing that same name again as Tony's instigating, Tony's starting or whatever else. Time to talk with Tony. If they're really good students, they look like honor students. They're just wonderful, and they're like, they ask them politely to stop or whatever else, move their desks away, and everything else, ask for teacher intervention there. And so Tony has nobody to play with still. Who do you think he wants to dance? Who's next on the dance card? You, the teacher. Okay? So he's going to dance with somebody. If he can't get the response that he wants from those people there, now you're going to have the student who's going to start being difficult in your classroom directly to you. So you're going to start seeing the verbal aggression or whatever in the classroom there. This is the point where basically you want to start giving him one-on-one attention, getting him away from peers and everything else, because if he continues to escalate, if I go up in the stance or whatever else, rather than giving him choices, offer, time, and everything else, now I risk him going up to the peak. Now again, peak could be different. If you're in kindergarten, it could be you have a tantrum, you sit on the floor and cry. You may put your hoodie up and just go to sleep or whatever, and that's your cycle there. You may cuss at me. You look violent. You may throw punches or whatever else. In other words, it varies. That's why knowing the students is really important. That's why if you're an ED teacher, I always say have the same substitute all the time, because he or she will know your students and know, so it's not just suddenly, well, desk went flying across the classroom was when the administrator comes in. Because, well, there was a few things that happened before that desk went flying across the classroom. You just weren't paying attention because you were worried about your lesson plan, okay? And knowing what the kids' names are. Let me go back here real quick again. The peak, all we're concerned here is safety now. That's the only thing that we're concerned with. I am not processing with the student. I am no longer giving choices with the student. Everything else is. I'm concerned about the safety of all the students around her. I'm concerned about my safety and the safety of the student there. Okay, so those are the considerations there. It is exhausting. If it is a physical aggression or whatever else is, even if it's a tantrum from a little kid, it is exhausting to have it stay in the peak. They can't stay in there too long. Okay, they've got to start coming down. Your job is to allow them to de-escalate. Okay, we're not processing with them. They're not in the thought process or whatever the talk is. Let them come down. What eventually is going to happen, and basically Colvin never really talked about in his literature, but you'll see on real life experiences, there's a depression stage here. And that's where most of the kids realize, uh-oh, I'm kind of screwed now. And I don't care if they were the toughest gangbangers threatening to kill me and everything else is, when they realize they're going back to juvie, they're bawling their eyes out. And I don't care how many death threats they made to you or anything else. I don't care if he's a kindergarten kid or a high school kid. The depression stage is when you want to start processing with him. Because that's when all that gang persona, all the toughness and everything else will go away, and you have a small window to make a game plan. And what's your goal here? It's only one goal. Is this trigger going to happen again in his life? I guarantee it. Was the actions that he or she took, was it a good action? Did it come up with a good consequence? No. Either he's getting suspended, he's going to juvie, or whatever else it may be. What's the game plan? The next time this happens, what are we going to do differently? Okay? And this is the one time that you can actually process the kid without getting threatening your life or whatever else and all this other tough stuff going on there. Because if you wait too long and you try doing it the next day or anything else, guess what you got back again? That same persona going on. Okay? So take advantage of it, but don't do it too early because you risk going up to a second peak cycle. And I'm sure some of you have seen that where the kid fights again in the office or whatever else that's going on. So again, this is a little overlast. The con basically is that enjoy it while it lasts. My recommendation is reinforce those pro-social behaviors that you want reinforced that continue there. Once the trigger happens, notice what precipitates the problem. What was the antecedent? What caused it? Slow or fast trigger. The agitation stage is basically let them vent. Just sit, be quiet, ask open-ended questions, and let them talk and discuss what is going on there. If you get to the acceleration stage, you've got to set limits. Start thinking about what safety is, what conditions are going on, how can I get him to talk one-on-one, walk outside or whatever, give him options. Remember, he's got tunnel vision now, okay? And then again, if it's the peak, basically all I'm doing is for safety issues. De-escalation time is let the child cool down until he gets to the depression stage, and then the recovery is basically problem solve. What are we going to do the next time? Today's choices didn't work very effectively for you. What can we do differently the next time it occurs? And again, these, again, you can go through. I'm not going to beat these to death here because we're kind of running out of time. But again, the calm stage, we'll talk about that. And see, this is what you have for your notes section, the agitation, provide space and options. And these are example on the other side, what you'll see from the thing. Like in agitation, you see the kid's eyes dart, he's off task, withdraws from group participation. This is my favorite picture of all. Acceleration there. Threats and intimidation there, because remember, he's looking for a dance party. It's no fun to dance by yourself. They want to dance. They're most likely going to reach out to whoever the peers are next to them. You as a teacher will start hearing about Joey complaining because he or she's doing this to me, doing that to me there. Okay? If you miss that, stand by for the peak cycle. Okay? And again, this is going to all depend upon the child that you're dealing with, the individual who you're with. Okay? And then de-escalation, allow time and space. That's why I like cooldown rooms. Cooldown rooms are a really good place. Interclass timeouts where I have an agreement with the other teachers and I go up, Miss Melissa, I go, when the child acts in my classroom, he or she can go there to calm down in your classroom because he has no issues with Miss Melissa. Who does he hate? Me. So I'm giving him an opportunity to basically de-escalate on his own, and then when they're ready, do you think Miss Melissa's going to keep my child all day long? No, she's got enough kids in her own or whatever else. She's like, hey, Joe, kid's ready to come back. And typically, you have an agreement on the back is, an interclass timeout is, they come in, there's a chair, it's pre-beat beforehand, at the back of the classroom there, where they sit, when he looks calm enough, there's just a form you fill out, and you go, what did I do? Okay, I cussed at Mr. Ryan, blah, 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 blah. What will you do next time, differently? I hate Mr. Ryan, die, not ready to go back to Mr. Ryan's classroom yet, or whatever. Comes back during a natural pause of instruction, if there's no communication or whatever else, tries it again or whatever else, goes, I was disrespectful, next time I'll ask for a walk, cool down period or something like that. Joey's coming back. And then we can process about the incident because he's already gone through the de-escalation stage. Much more efficient than putting him locking him in a closet or something along those lines, okay? Much more respectful. And then again, the recovery phase is getting them engaged again. Now, understand, their logical thought process was, do you love me or do you hate me still? Deep down, you still think I'm mean and everything else there. So when she gets back in the classroom, don't be surprised. When I walk past, I want to reinforce as much as possible, 5 to 1, thanks for coming back. Do you think she's going to go, oh, it's so nice to be back, Mr. Ryan? She's going to mumble some 4-letter word at me or whatever else. Do not engage. I am so proud of her for coming back and acting like an adult or whatever else in my classroom there. It's like, so I may put a token buck and she may throw it right off the thing. Pick your fights. That is not one I'm going for. Let it go by. And I may do the fastest drive-by. Great job. Because I don't even want to hang there. I don't even want to hang. I just want to give that reinforcement. And then basically as she calms down further and further, re-engagement or whatever, and when I know she's ready, then we can talk and process about the event. Okay? All right. Teach anger management. This is a skill development. Okay? Skill streaming, numerous programs out there. How do you do when you get angry? Many of our kids don't have the skill set to calm themselves down. That's dangerous to go through life like that. How many people have you seen as adults out in the community that something happens to them? How about driving? How many knuckleheads have you seen out there with road rage or whatever else there? You know, if you can't calm yourself down, that is just dangerous in society. So you have to teach that skill. And some people didn't have, whatever reason, parents or whatever else, to teach them those skills. We need to do that. I talked about other rooms, creating other rooms, cool-down rooms and snoozling room. Snoozling room is especially big with autism population there. And basically, it's a sensory thing, so you can have everything from, you know, textile boxes or whatever, balls that they can play with, different things or whatever else. Works extremely well. It also works very well with Alzheimer's patients, because Alzheimer's have the same thing. They get paranoid, they don't know where they are or whatever else. It's an opportunity for them to calm down, so you see much less aggression in that. So it works very well with different populations there. Slowly, it started in Europe and is slowly coming over to the United States. You're seeing more and more of it. Again, be proactive. We talked about training your staff, providing cool-down rooms, and teaching the kids about anger management there. These are some of the programs, again. I said we revisit it really quickly there. Calm every storm, response, right response. They are not the same, okay? If you leave with nothing else from this thing, understanding these training programs are very, very different. This is an example on one of the articles I did on these, or overview of it. The total time even varies. What they talk about, crisis de-escalation, how many restraint procedures, some teach seclusion, okay, how many do debriefing. They're all vary tremendously. But based on you need to find it. There's nothing wrong with restraints if you deal with that environment. If you're in residential or whatever else, that's fine. You need to know those. But if you're just in a gen ed setting or whatever, that is not an appropriate thing. You need to pick a program that just really goes on the de-escalation component of the training program there. So choose wisely. And this is, again, on the different things of what many of them teach. Okay? That's just an overview pie chart there. All right? Crisis and opportunity, understand. We said there's 3 potential outcomes. You can damage the relationship, stay the same, or you can improve it. Our goal is always to improve the therapeutic outcome of a response there. It should be a learning thing. Okay? Understand the change. The student must understand the event. Okay? Awareness of the reaction of others. This is difficult. How many here have kids who can't pick up the social cues of their peers? Okay? Bullying is huge. If you interview bullies, who do they think their victims are? What is their number 1 response? Their friends. That's their response. That's a very skewed. That's as skewed as the thing as the teacher hates me or whatever else for a response on that. So it's important to understand on that how we teach and train that. Okay? Change, the kid needs to desire, have the belief that it's possible, and this is huge for kids with disabilities because our kids lack this tremendously, whether they're teaching ED, LD, or ID. They lack the confidence to take risks. Okay? Even if they know, even if you know the kid knows the answer in your class, do they raise their hand? Why would they want to play this game? Okay? In other words, as many times if I get that, I get no credit for getting it right, and what happens if I get it wrong? I look stupid in front of everybody there. Kids with disabilities are not risk takers. Okay? You need to develop, that's why that 5-to-1 ratio of creating a positive reinforcing environment is critical. They have to trust the adults. Okay? Going hands-on somebody, I've never in my life, and I've done a lot of restraints being residential and special days, never once have I ever restrained a kid, and at the end of the kid turns to me and goes, "Thank you, Mr. Ryan. That was very comforting and reinforcing for the thing." Never, ever, ever. I've been spit at a lot, bit, everything else in regards to that, but I've never had to reinforce. You have to develop that relationship. Going hands-on with a student is never developing that therapeutic relationship, especially with kids with ED who have such a history of physical and sexual abuse in their background. Okay. All right. The goals, be flexible, teach them. You have to practice the skills, social skills. Teach them the skills they need, and you've got to practice it. And then when you see it in the real-life environment, what's going to happen again? They're going to start getting tunnel vision, so you have to give them the prompts and the reminders when so you see them instigating with other peers is how they're going to respond, okay? Because they're going to fail. If you just go through the skill streaming or whatever else, teach them the social skills, and you put them together again, what's going to happen? You're going to be pulling them apart again one more time. So you want to find the point where I'm going to test them, but again, I can separate them easily before it gets escalation up there, okay? And then again, last one, other recommendations there. That should be part 4. My apologies, not part 2. Okay? Teach the anger. We talked about that one there before it strikes and how to respond to it. This is the snoozing rooms. Okay, so this is an example one. Again, different sensory issues that they can calm down on. And again, there's no limit. You go to the dollar store, create whatever you can possibly think of that kids would like to play with, proprioceptive things. The interclass timeout we talked about. Have an agreement. Now again, it's optimum if Miss Melissa's right next to me, logistically. I don't want to send an agitated student across all the school boundaries or whatever else to somebody else's classroom. The likelihood that he's going to instigate somewhere else along the way is pretty high. So try to have an agreement with a teacher that's just nearby. So it's close proximity. I can come get him in a second or whatever. Okay? Cooldown room, I really like these, is basically, so if you have a seclusion room, rip the door off and basically make it a cooldown room where the person goes on his or her own request. Because when you get mad, does somebody come into work and remove you? Or do you go, I just need a breather, and let me go down and calm down myself? And putting a time limit on it isn't really said, because you may calm yourself down in 2 minutes. You may take a half hour. We're all different and unique, and so you got to let that child how long. And again, if it does take a long time, then we need strategies on anger management and how to calm yourself down. All right, PBIS. I can't emphasize this one enough on the primary level interventions to prevent the problem behaviors from ever occurring. When we're all talking using the same terminology, we all can work with every student in the school. If we have our own unique behavior management plan, when Jessica is seen by another teacher, she's probably not going to respond to whatever the terminology that he or she uses in their classroom, the strategies. You're not even my teacher. Why should I respond to you there? But when everybody's on board the same plan, the response, you see behaviors generalize across the environment. Okay, and this is why it's so important to have all the teachers involved as well as the parents, because I want that behavior to generalize just not in my classroom, but everywhere. Far too often what I've seen, even with my own kids, is when I can't get other teachers aboard, is they discriminate. They're going to act well in my class or whatever else, and they go back to math class and they're a heck of terror, you know, whatever else. Or the mom comes in and you see meltdowns in the supermarket and everything else. I go, we eliminated that behavior 2 years ago in school because the mom is not going aboard the same thing with the interventions there. Okay? So again, going over primary, secondary, tertiary, I don't think they had any sessions. It's unusual. Usually they always have a PBIS lesson on one of these. I'll talk to Terry. He's a guru in that for teaching that. Okay? And then functional behavior assessments. When you see a recurring behavior or serious behavior and it's not responding, the child's non-responder to that, you have not identified the function or the purpose of the behavior. What you're doing is you're continuing to guess at what it is. And FBA provides you an opportunity to identify what that underlying function or purpose. Is it escape? Is it attention-seeking behavior that he does? Your intervention needs to satisfy that specific function. You can come up with a great intervention, but if my thing is for attention-seeking and you don't satisfy that, it's basically, remember the whack-a-mole games? You may stop that, but I'm going to have another maladaptive behavior coming up because I want attention-seeking behavior. Okay. And applied behavior analysis, I would highly recommend, out of all those that are going back from the master's degree, I would highly recommend you take an ABA course as one of your electives or a composite. I think it's the most valuable course that is out of the entire master's program because it can be applied to all populations. And it's the basic understanding of behavioral principles. So you're not just learning tricks of the trade and go, okay, I got this repertoire, I'll try this. If that doesn't work, you're understanding actually what makes those tricks work. What is the underlying functions of those behaviors that's shaping the child's behavior? So again, I can't emphasize this one enough on applied behavior analysis there. And for paraprofessionals, they actually have a BCBA kind of where it's a thing for, do you remember the name of it? The behavior tech. And again, it's a great one. So if you have shadows working one-on-one, which is very common with children with autism there, just don't take some mom who's volunteering at the school and put them one-on-one because you may actually be reinforcing maladaptive behaviors because she may be trying her very best to help the child, but they're reinforcing inappropriate behaviors. So think about professional training at that level and again, it's not as advanced as the regular BCBA, but again, really good skills for them to know. Other websites that you can use for your considerations there, okay, reports and websites. And then I was told to open it up for